Hello. Today I'm talking with Kevin Rutherford. We're talking about paying the bills by asking questions and making the invisible visible. Before this episode, I want to give a trigger warning because we mentioned the suicide of Graham. So, I'm Yves Hanul from Who's Agile. My pronouns are he and him. Welcome to my channel. You see a lot of agilists around me on this screen. If you want to hear me interviewing, please click that subscribe button because these are the people that I've invited so far. If you think I'm missing people, let me know in the comments. And that like button, well, if you liked today's interview, don't forget to click it. Hello everyone, and hello with me I have Kevin. I guess this is how I should pronounce your name?
Yep.
Indeed. Well, it's a kind of a name that kind of sounds similar in lots of languages, I would guess. And when I said here with me, I want to show also a little bit. I'm in Belgium, in Ghent, and you're in the UK, like you said earlier, close to Manchester. Macclesfield, is that how I should pronounce this?
Yes, that's right.
And indeed, if we, how do I do this again? Zoom out a little bit. I think Manchester is this where, so yeah, not that far away indeed. So let's bring you back. And here also, it's close to 9 o'clock in the evening on a Wednesday evening on my side. And what's the time on your side?
It's close to 8 p.m. here, so I'm an hour behind you.
Yeah, I'm living in the future, like I like to say. Depending on how we look on it. But that's the nice things about all these digital tools these days. We can both talk from our preferred place to have this kind of conversations in our own time zone, and we just need to find a moment where we can find that time. So, Kevin, before we jump into the questions, what do you want people to know about you? How would you introduce yourself?
I guess that's the answer to that question has probably changed quite a lot over the years. Right now, I guess I mentor agile leaders to help them improve the bottom line, usually by helping them with systems thinking. Until recently, I used to say that if you know the classic thing of you're in a lift and somebody says what you do and you've got 5 seconds until the door's open. My answer to that was always, I disrupt software teams.
I like that. I disrupt software teams. And what was a typical reaction when you say that?
Very often puzzlement, to be honest, because it's not a particularly constructive thing to say, but it's entertaining, so it's memorable.
Mm-hmm. Which is important if you have a couple of seconds in a lift to make sure
Yeah.
that people remember you.
Yeah.
So that
But these days I'm winding down towards retirement, so I'm doing much less coaching, in fact none, much less training, almost none, and I just have a few clients that I mentor on a very much a part-time basis. So when they have problems,
then they call you up and they say, Kevin, I would like to have a word with you. Can you make some time for me? Something like that, or is that scheduled?
We usually have scheduled time sort of once a week or once a fortnight, depending on their needs. But also basically any time. So just back end of last week, I got an emergency call saying from someone saying we've got this project. Suddenly it's showing signs of trouble. Can you jump on and talk to some people, have a look at some documents, and help out for a couple of days? So it's just light touch stuff.
Right. And when you say jump in, is that this for a couple of days? This sounds like you have to go in the office, or is this remote
No,
at that
it's
moment? How does it work?
I don't think I've been into anyone's office for quite some time now. So it's usually just talk to the relevant people, read some documents, send some emails, answer questions, join meetings, sometimes just with my clients or sometimes with their clients as well. Mm-hmm. So just light touch mentoring stuff these days. I'm very old now and very tired.
Which is, no coincidence that the word tired isn't retired. But okay, that's a whole different kind of conversation, I would say. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that lovely introduction. So let's jump into that very first question. What is something that people usually don't know about you, but has influenced you in who you are?
Just looking at my notes. I've got two bullet points here. The first thing that springs to mind is that I'm autistic, but quite a lot of people know about that now because I've been ranting about it for a couple of years. So that might not meet your criteria. It's a kind of badly kept secret. I've been making a lot of noise about that for quite some time, but it's definitely influenced what I do and how I do it. And in fact, I got my diagnosis in 2017 at the age of 56, 57, something like that. And as we were walking back from the psychiatrist's office back to our car, my wife turned to me and said, "You do realize that you've built your entire career on your autistic traits." And what she said there has always stuck with me, and it's absolutely true. I suppose I have a fairly strong individual style, and it all comes down to autistic traits at the end of the day. So that was my first thought in answering that question. But
I want to go a little bit deeper on what your partner said to you. Could you give an example of this? How did you build your career around that? If you want that, because I can imagine it could be personal.
So since I got the diagnosis, with most new clients, on the first day, I will make a point of saying in public to as many people as will hear, I'm autistic, and I explain some of the things that means in terms of what I'm like socially and how my energy levels need to adapt to all of that. But I also say what my autism means for you is that I see things that you can't see, and I'll say things you wouldn't dream of saying. And I think that's it's a great thing to be able to, first of all, diagnose system problems in organizations, and secondly, cut through the politics. I mean, it creates its own kind of politics just by doing that. Exactly, yeah. But I realized after getting the diagnosis that I'm not really bothered by that sort of thing, and I just kind of bulldoze my way through.
And
And
now you now, thanks to diagnostics, you know more or of why you're doing it. Is that?
I think so. Yes, I think so. I mean, getting the diagnosis so late in life means that effectively your whole identity is wiped out, and you have to build a new one based on what you now know. So you can look back over the previous 50 odd years and suddenly explain all of the wacky stuff that happened, all of the trials and tribulations and all of the weird stuff that has happened in your life that you blamed yourself for.
And now you
Now
kind of
maybe you have
understand.
an explanation for it and you can see patterns. But also I realized that I can build positively on that going forward. So for the last 8 years, however long I've had the diagnosis, it's meant that I mask an awful lot less. So I don't pretend quite so much to try being neurotypical. I'm much more just me, and that dials up some of the things like seeing through to the system, and cutting through the politics. Because without the mask, I don't have political filters quite so much as other people
Others.
might.
And because you were diagnosed so late in life, is that were there moments, or I guess, but I'm trying to see if that's true, that, for example, in school or in the early start of your career, that people kind of called you weird or whatever, said things like you should behave more like this or that?
Oh, absolutely, all the time. Yes, and I think the thing that's striking me this year more than anything is there are a lot of sort of autistic characters in fiction. Rain Man is the obvious, really bad example.
I was about to say, yeah.
But you know, the likes of Sherlock Holmes and there are very few examples of. Well, there are a lot of examples of the autistic person being brilliantly logical and emotionally cold, but there are very few examples of the autistic person having complete shutdowns and meltdowns because of social hangovers and the complete exhaustion that comes from trying to survive in the neurotypical world, and trying to socialize in a group of people who aren't expecting you to be the way you are. So I've realized that there are days when I'm non-speaking simply because emotional exhaustion from earlier things that have happened. I've realized that because I had no idea of the toll that was being taken by social interactions and the sort of the expectations of the neurotypical world, every few years I would just have a complete burnout and just drop off the grid for, maybe a year or more.
And that was because before you were trying to fit in, or because you didn't know how to regulate everything that's happening around you?
I think it's both. I think if you don't try hard to fit in, you're labeled weird and you're ostracized, and socially that's difficult to deal with. But if you do try to fit in, that's exhausting. And either way, you get you get meltdowns or shutdowns, whichever way you deal with it. And my wife was also diagnosed late in life, in her 50s, and it's much harder for girls. It's much harder for undiagnosed autistic girls because the social expectations are even higher. I mean,
And it was very late until they even accepted the idea that women could have autism. I mean, for a
absolutely.
long time period, it was like, this is an all male
Yes.
problem, whatever you call it, challenge. And indeed. And so who of you was diagnosed first? How did that influence each other?
I was diagnosed first in 2017, then our son in 2021, and then my wife only last year. So
And
it's been a slow burn.
it's interesting that she already, like you say, you go back to the car. So she says, okay, she makes that statement about how you organize your life, but she didn't reflect on herself at that moment, nor you, or
No, I mean it's a strange thing because even in the last 5 years, society's knowledge about autism has grown quite a lot. And even in 2017, when I got my diagnosis, we didn't really know what it meant. We've since done a lot of research as much as we can, particularly to support our son, who got his when he was 20 or 19.
still at the fairly start of his life, or his adult life in a way. So of course, the more you know, the more you can help him.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So, but the understanding of autism is improving really rapidly at the moment. One of the main sort of models for it, monotropism, is only 20 years old. And I'm not sure I could even have been diagnosed as autistic much before 1980, when I was already 20 odd. So,
Yeah, I think that's a very important message to bring, because indeed, back 30 years ago, like you say, Rain Man was the typical autistic, the way people are shown. And yeah, my partner works with people who have autism, but then very severe autism, and also low IQ, and typically a couple of other problems. So I'm much more familiar with the world, I would say. And at the same time, like you say, there is a very particular way of looking at people, and like the world that end die. I know these are more people that are barely capable of working in the in society, and people like you, that's lesser known. And it's indeed, like you say, only the last couple of years that the society as a whole starts to understand, like, okay, this is a much broader spectrum, and there is much more to it, and yeah, so that's
but
it's good
equally,
that we are thinking.
at the same time, we're starting to drop things like high functioning, low functioning as labels, because there are days when I can't function at all.
Right.
So it's right across the board. I don't see it as a disability, but I am disabled by the society that surrounds us. So there's
you don't work in the neurotypical way that the society expects the normal people to work, and the abled people to work. And like you say, you're not disabled, but you don't work with the typical way, and like you said earlier, and I think it's important to stress out, it brings you a lot of value because the system thinking and many of the more smart autistic people are very capable in this kind of sense. Like you say, people see these kind of systems, they make links with neurotypicals have a lot more time needed to digest these kind of things. So it's not just the disability, it's also the enablement on the other side. But unfortunately, indeed, most companies, they look at the weird thing and then they forget, like, oh, there is also a practical, a good part about that.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
and so of course that's very clear that had a huge influence on you. You gave already some examples. Is there ways that you now understand, like for example when you were 20 or even younger, where you didn't understand really, like maybe how you were different than other people? Could you give some examples if you care to share?
I think the obvious answer to that is that from the age of 4, maybe even younger, when visitors to the family said, and what are you going to be when you grow up? The answer was a mathematician. And it was very, very predetermined. I was almost one-dimensional in that sense. And it ended up coming true, I think, almost by fiat, or almost because that's the only path that people could see that made sense for my behaviors.
And for you as well, or just?
I see that's the curious thing. When you get diagnosed so late, yes, it puts all of the past into perspective and allows you to explain it, but it also means that there's you have no idea what your life might have been.
Right.
So I have no idea whether I am. So somebody said to me last week, "And what do you do?" And I said, "I'm a mathematician."
And that was a reflex, or that's
yeah, that's an absolute reflex, and I have no idea whether that is my natural inbuilt identity or whether that's the programming that was caused by neurotypicals looking at this strange little boy who was intensely logical and didn't show much external emotion and was very good at sums. I've no idea whether that's the real me or whether that's a template that was imposed upon me because of my autistic traits, and we'll never know. We'll never find out.
No, well, maybe there is in a different universe there is another version of you that has that, but probably we'll never figure that one out.
We'll never know. We'll never know. But so that wasn't my answer to your question.
Wow. Okay.
Because so many people now know that I'm autistic,
Right.
because I've made such a noise about it. So the thing that not many people do know is that from that early age, I was put on stage as to do readings and poetry readings and plays and theatre and so on. And so I spent, when I wasn't doing mathematics or being rude to neurotypical people, I was on stage reading out poetry or reading, or
And was
doing.
that something that was interest of you, or was that maybe because your parents thought, oh, we need to give him something extra, or was how did that happen that you were doing that?
It's interesting because as an autistic person, you're very often, if you're not diagnosed, you're very often labeled as introverted. And I was, but I always knew that I wasn't. People say, he's introverted, he's shy, whatever. I always knew I wasn't. So I think the going on stage and performing and so on is closer to the real me. And the reason I bring it up is because in many ways it's been as important in my career as all the logical stuff has been. Because I think to be a good agile coach, whatever that means, to be I mean, I'm not claiming to be good, but to be comfortable doing it, I think public speaking skills are really, really important. And it's something I've always encouraged in junior members of any team I work with, is cast off the shyness and get out there and speak in front of people.
And is that I'm trying to make the link, and maybe I'm overshooting things, but is it also because you're autistic that you see, oh, this is something that is important, there is something that is different and or that people don't see, and that you push yourself even to try it, even
I think this is one thing that is not related to that. I think these are two potentially orthogonal parts of this particular human being.
Yeah, I definitely see. That's why I'm asking if there was a link. Well, of course, everything is linked because it's you, but at the same time, it might not be.
I can't see a link, and they do feel fundamentally different from each other.
Right.
I do think the ability to hold an audience and be confident and comfortable doing it is really important for anyone's career, I think. And beyond that, the ability to actually construct the content and make it engaging and such that it has a narrative that holds your audience is a second additional skill that I think is really, really important. I'm not claiming to have either of those, but I do enjoy it,
And when you say you do enjoy it, what's the earliest memory that you have of you being on stage?
Maybe I was 7 and reciting Jabberwocky in competition.
Wow! Immediately in competition. Wow!
Yeah. Competitive parents, I think. But Jabberwocky springs to mind because I suspect that I've got a feeling I did that one several times. It might have been a sort of go-to party piece. So we're talking mid 1960s here. So I can definitely picture a hall in a junior school, maybe even a primary school, and me reciting Jabberwocky with a table of judges, assessing how we were all doing.
And already enjoying it at that moment, or?
I think so. I don't know whether I enjoyed the doing of it or the accolades afterwards. I think I probably enjoyed the doing of it. Actually, I certainly remember being in plays and doing readings and recitals and stuff. Age 7 and 8.
Wow, that's wonderful to have such memories. I would say to have these kind of things, and it's interesting also that although you have these memories, although you have all that experience, still you consider yourself a mathematician. You could also had your own impression, like, okay, I don't know, I'm an actor, or I'm I don't know, I'm a spokesperson or whatever. That so these were two different kind of personas, maybe even, or how does that work?
Yeah, who knows? I mean, a complete Jekyll and Hyde character.
Right.
Yes, I mean, I did amateur dramatics until I was in my 30s, really, and stopped due to pressure of work. But yeah, it's never taken over as an identity. I just see it as a tool, I suppose. I don't even see, that's not even conscious. It's just there.
Yeah, it's but that's why I'm asking, because you said very particular, especially like even a week ago you called yourself a mathematician, where a big part of your professional life you were a speaker and you were capturing audiences, of course, in a completely different environment and different kind of audience, I would also say, than when you were 7 or 8. But it is a very, or it was a very particular part of your professional life as well. So I think it kind of shows that both were part of you as a person professionally. Or am I seeing things that were not there?
I think you're right, and I think we're all multitudes,
Right.
you know, and I think I've been very fortunate that I've been able to carve out a career in which the ability to be logical and the ability to be openly unmasked autistic and the ability to speak to a room full of people kind of all coalesced into one thing. And I have no idea whether that found me or I found it.
Right. So that's, and of course, again, like we said earlier on, it's hard to know now, but this, for me, it's one of the reasons. This is why I also take so much time for this question with you, is that I love these. Well, first of all, I thank you for your openness, but I love these kind of stories that people bring, especially when you're near retirement and you can say, okay, this is how it then worked out for me without my diagnosis. It kind of, and I think that can be a good inspiration for younger people who figure out, oh, I'm sometimes a little bit weird. I sometimes feel strange on when things are politics are happening, and maybe it could inspire them to look like, okay, maybe you're also neurodivergent in a different kind of way or in the same way. Let's look at that and how could you and at the same time as an example to make sure that people don't feel like, oh, then I'm out of luck. No, you actually had a very successful career building it with its ups and downs, like you said, without knowing. You went in a couple of burnouts, so that is definitely a hard part, but it was still possible, I would say, in your own way.
Yeah, and I mean, I do think that public speaking, as a broad term, is almost as important a skill as anything technical we have.
Yeah,
the ability to be persuasive, the ability to hold an argument, to hold an audience, to present a narrative. if you can't do those things, you often get pushed into a backwater. You often get sidelined by the people who can do those things, even if you've got important things to say. So I recommend everybody in their early stages of their career to just get up there and practice these things, because I think it's been really, really valuable to me.
Yeah, I can definitely see that, and yeah, it's sometimes hard to convince people because they're shy or introvert and thinking like I will never be able to do that, and at the same time, it is a skill, and it's a skill that can be learned, and you were lucky that you started experimenting when you were 7, so at that, or maybe younger, but at least 7 you remember, and that meant that, yeah, by the time you became an adult and you were working, that you already had built up some muscle or muscle memory, or I don't know how to call it, to do these kind of things. And I think that's really is important for other people to hear, like, okay, it is hard, and especially the later you start with it, but please, yeah, experiment with it. Please try and build up a little more of that muscle. And for some of them, it will stay hard, but they will always become better. I think that is something that is important for people to realize. So that's
Yeah.
okay. I want to move to that second question. If you had not been doing what you've been doing now, do you have any idea what would have become of you? Maybe you gave it already a little bit away, but I'm still very interested in what's.
I think I would be gathering dust in a university maths department. Even at the age of 20, that's what my future looked like it was going to be. And I went on from my degree to do a PhD in maths. I did it part-time while I was working. And it was that finally put me off and said, there's not enough practical, real world activity going on to keep me interested. But certainly until I was 20, the path had been marked out. You know, I was going to be in a dogtooth jacket with leather patches on the sleeves, covered in chalk dust, and writing equations on a blackboard.
And that until you're 20, at least, that gave you also energy. I'm hearing, or not?
Absolutely, yes. It was a single-minded. I mean, I was also a chess player at that time, and in my late 20s, I had to give that up because fundamentally I'm too competitive, and
with chess, there is not, well, you either win or you lose, but there is not much.
At that time in my late 20s, I was working as a freelance software developer. I was doing a PhD in maths, and I was playing chess for 3 county teams around here.
Wow.
So I was out 3 nights a week doing that.
And when I hear competitive, I also hear that you were studying to become better at chess at that moment, or not?
Yes, and I think I'll never be any good at chess because I have an awful memory, and you have to know an awful lot of book openings and book endings to progress, particularly beyond county level. and I don't. I have an awful memory for that, and I think that again, that's being a programmer worked out well because there are manuals. You don't have to remember stuff. So it and also being a mathematician as well. They're two careers where memory doesn't matter quite so much. I could never have been a historian. I mean, that's a gross simplification, but anything that involves memory for facts, I can't do. So I could never become any good at chess. But also, it was too time consuming and too emotionally involving because I cared about winning. And so since
And you noticed that other people around you were better at remembering tricks at plays and things like that, and so that
yeah, and also they can walk away from a chessboard and not care quite so much about it. So I've not played competitively since 1987, 88, something like that. And again, that's another the thing that I'm realizing. Another autistic trait is I either do something 100% or 0%, nothing in between. So I stopped playing chess, and I've not played for 30 odd 40 years. Just
so
switched
very
off.
like you said you played 3 weeks a night. A lot of time and energy goes into that, and at some point you decide this is not healthy or this is not working for me, and you stop cold turkey, I
Yeah,
would say, and like not looking back for years and years and years and not playing anything.
yeah.
That's
But then I had a job and a PhD to fill the time
yeah,
as well.
exactly. But I can imagine that for a lot of people, when you stop, especially when you're some passionate, that it's sometimes hard. And like you kind of swap immediately to the other two things that could also take on a lot of time, and not well. I don't know if it's not caring, but at least saying like, okay, the decision is made. Let's move on with my life in a way.
Yeah, I mean, a very personal decision, very, very, very much about self-preservation, I think.
Which is and which is, I think I was about to say, which is very healthy, but then of course it depends on when you do it. Was it on the right moment, or did you wait too long? Was it already becoming a problem that you combined these three things, or was it right in time?
I think it was just in the nick of time.
So in a way you understood what was needed for you to keep healthy, or to keep, yeah, to stay
I,
sane in a way.
I'm not going to claim that amount of self knowledge um, or even analytical ability. I think it just got to be too much, and I stopped.
Yeah, but sometimes I would say sometimes our body knows before we really understand it, and you might have known it without knowing it,
Maybe,
if you understand
maybe,
what I mean. So,
yeah,
but of course, again, hard to know. But it's I really like that yeah, that story, because it shows, and I think you're not the only one. If I While you were saying, I was thinking like, yeah, there's a couple of things that I've done almost very yeah, a lot of spending a lot of time and then stopping, like just like that, and only realizing a couple of years later like, oh really, I did stop and I didn't even look back at. And that's
yeah.
I recognize a part of that, so thank you for sharing that. Let's move to that third question. What is your biggest challenge, at least the biggest one that you want to share openly on the internet, and why is that a good thing for you?
I mean, at the risk of being very, very repetitive, being autistic and having ADHD in a neurotypical world is is a challenge for life.
And
What
is the fact that you know now makes that easier as a challenge, or is it harder? What is there?
So the second part of your question is, why is it a good thing?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a good thing for two reasons. First of all, it helps you make sense of the past. But more interestingly, perhaps, is so the second note I've got against this question is what's my biggest challenge? Is what am I going to do in retirement? And the answer is starting to make itself known as providing autism support for people somehow. So we've already, my wife and I, started thinking locally here about setting up a support group for people like ourselves, late diagnosed, late discovered people. We've met a few other people in our situation, and the stories are all the same. But there is a need to tell them. There is a need to share them. There is a need to gather together in groups and let off steam and give each other support and validation and roadmaps, if you like, for dealing with the novelty of having your identity ripped away from you and being replaced by a completely different one. And yet we're still navigating a world built by and for neurotypical people. So the biggest challenge is surviving as an autistic in that world, but also a really interesting positive part of that challenge is I'm a firm believer that people like ourselves who are capable, whatever that means, we should give back. And the possibility of giving back in terms of support for people who've been through what we've been through in the past few years seems like a positive part of that challenge.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Realizing this, learning about about more about yourself and the differences, and at the same time, I think also supporting a young adult who's going through that life at this moment. I think there's a lot there that could really be helpful for a lot of people. I have a couple of friends who started out now doing trainings and working with companies, teaching them about neurodiversity because of a very similar story. I think it's also a couple that have both the differences kind of things, but yeah, they have their story is different than yours, and at the same time it's the same because, like you said, okay, they discovered some parts, they've seen how unadapted the world was, and now they're helping. In their case, they're helping a lot of companies to teach them about, okay, what does it mean to support. Where your story is, of course, much more helping the people itself, and I think this is something both parts we need as a society, I would say. Because companies need to be much more aware. I think these days, well, we're all looking for more people. Well, not everybody, but I think there is a shortage of people in a lot of companies, and these are very yourself, very capable people, but like you said, the world is not adapted to them and thinks they're to blame, and actually it sometimes feels much more the opposite.
And our difference is invisible. You know, I'm not sitting in a wheelchair in a very visible with a very visible disability, and so it's hard for society to recognize what my needs are, because I don't have a big, red spot on my back or whatever. So there's a lot to be done there in terms of making the invisible visible, and making it visible both to society but also to ourselves as individuals, and just coming to terms with all of that.
And what we didn't talk about is yet is what triggered you to get that diagnosed? Because I can imagine that before you get the diagnosis, you already kind of know a little bit, and that you need to do that diagnosis, or there is something. Is there a trigger that made you think like, oh, maybe that could be it, or what happened there?
There was a trigger. So I think you've been to the Lean Agile Scotland conference.
I haven't been, but I know it very well, and it was for a long time on my list for going. I'm going less to conferences. I'm doing the podcast to avoid going to other countries these days, while my children are on the last years before they leave the house. But it's definitely one of the ones that I want to go to. So yeah.
So that conference arose out of Scotland on Rails and the Scottish Ruby Conference, and that series of conferences was run by three people: Paul Wilson, Alan, my terrible memory, Francis, and Graham Matheson. And in 2016 or 2015, Graham took his own life. And up to that point, he'd been writing a blog, a very, very personal blog about the problems he was having. And in that, he talked about getting a diagnosis of autism. And what he was saying in there struck a real chord for me. So in 2015, that caused me to see the parallels in his behaviors and mine. And so I started doing the research, and that ended up in the diagnosis. So it came out of tragedy. Graham was a really nice guy, and very troubled. But his blog, in some ways, I'm not going to over dramatize, but it changed the direction of my life and my whole family.
Yeah, I can definitely imagine. Well, because like you said, okay, you were first diagnosed, and then more parts of your family were diagnosed. So definitely it has a lot of influence. And like you say, well, yeah, really, thank you for sharing that at that kind of level, because again, these are the kind of stories that will have impact on other people when people learn about it. And just like Graham had an impact on you with his blog, I'm really convinced that sharing these kind of stories can have a positive impact on other people. So thank you for sharing that. And definitely, yeah, like you said, a good thing to have all of that, to think all of that, and to learn about these things. I want to move to that next question. What drives you? Because in a lot of things, I hear passion, I hear drive. In huh, it's a different kind of drive. It's passion as sometimes with other people, because sometimes you have what we call table jumpers. I don't see you as a table jumper. You're much more, I would say, down to earth, much more relaxed is not the right word, but yeah, it's a different kind of attitude. But that doesn't mean that there is no drive or passion, because I hear the passion, also the fact what you say about you and your partner thinking about, okay, can we create a group for other people that are similar? There is a lot of passion there. Do you know where that's coming from?
I mean, one thing that has never been a driver for me is paying the bills. I've always followed my interests rather than doing things out of necessity, and that's a very, very privileged position to be in. You know,
You
I,
have to be
I
able to do that, of course.
I've been incredibly lucky. So thinking about this question, and it would seem from the past 45 minutes that I'm totally driven by autism, but I think that's maybe an artifact of the way we've been talking. I mean, I am. I'm kind of militant about it as much as anything. But there are other things that drive me as well, and I've got 3 bullet points on here that I noted down. One is when you're working with a group of people and suddenly the light goes on in someone's head and you can see it happen and they know it's happened as well, and they make positive noises, oohs and ahs, and start becoming fired up and start moving things around and drawing stuff, and that is definitely one thing that gets me up in the morning. And it doesn't happen every day. It might not happen every month or every 6 months, but when it does happen, it's really powerful. It's powerful for everyone in the room because it can be infectious if under the right sort of conditions. But when somebody suddenly sees I know, clicks with systems thinking, or clicks with how an event-based architecture works, or clicks with what you get from doing test-driven development, or whatever it is, when that light goes on, that's a really powerful driver for me, is helping people get to that point. And I've no idea how it happens. I mean, my approach to that is just to bombard people with ideas from so many different directions that one of them eventually is going to stick.
I like that idea, because I can definitely see some people around me, probably myself included, as okay, just giving ideas. And it's also for me how I read a book, where I love reading books, but it doesn't mean that I will be agreeing with everything in the book, but I just love reading books to see a multitude of ideas and then picking one or two, and that's what I think is the best kind of coaches do as well. We give some ideas and something might stick, and or hopefully a couple of things might stick,
Yeah.
or we keep bombarding ideas until something sticks, or until people say stop. Really,
I mean, it's like there's a huge oak tree just outside this window, and some years the oak tree produces tens of thousands of acorns, many more than most years, and the idea is that they're trying to beat the statistics of what the squirrels are doing and stuff, and it's just that it's just scattering seeds, which makes me sound really unprofessional as a coach or teacher, but that's the best I can come up with. But I've got a feeling there's something even deeper that drives me, and that's symmetry.
Say more.
The ex-peers call it simplicity, or sometimes self-similarity, but I see it everywhere. I mean, literally everywhere. I see it in the way I brush my teeth, or the way I walk to the shops, or the way I organize my files on my computer, or the way I think about TDD as a pull system, and Kanban as a pull system. So there's a symmetry between the two. My PhD is in symmetry, and I think it's a fundamental, deep, autistic need to organize the world. And I think it's been there in me probably since I was born or able to reason about the world and speak. I think it goes very, very deep. I think I look for symmetries everywhere, and I think in so doing, I use what's the quote? Perfection is achieved not when there is nothing more to add, but when there is nothing more to take away.
Right.
And I think that is a symmetry thing. I think that is about finding the underlying essence of a thing, the fundamental shape of a thing. In Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, Percy calls it the analytical knife. The ability to find where to slice an idea so that it naturally organizes itself into pieces. There's a book called The Choice by Ellie Goldratt, and we'll talk about Goldratt later on. And he talks about the inherent simplicity in any system. The idea that, he says, if you can describe a system in 4 sentences, then it's simple. And I look for designs, I look for architectures that are composed of 6 plus or minus 1 pieces. And I think by doing that, we're finding something at the core of the essence of things. There's a brilliant technique, I'm sure you know it. I think it's from Michael Feathers, called Naked CRC. So it's like CRC cards, the classic Kent Beck and Ward Cunningham thing with cards where you class responsibilities, collaborators, a way of discovering objects. Rebecca Werfsbrock and Nancy Wilkerson talk about them in great length in their books. It's a great way of role-playing object interactions. Mike Feathers introduced a version called Naked CRC, where you're actually not allowed to write on the cards. All you can do is talk and hold them and move them, and by doing that, you imprint on the minds of the people in the conversation the roles that those cards are playing. And it's a really, really powerful technique. And again, it only works with up to half a dozen cards, because that's about all you can hold in your hand.
Exactly, yeah.
But it's a great way of, to me, it's a great way of finding simplicity and symmetries and the essence of the structure of something. So I think that has driven most of what I've done. It's driven the mathematics. I think it's what I was seeking when I was playing chess. I think it's what I look for when I'm coaching agile teams, because all the self-similarities fundamentally boil down to everything's a pull system. So there are symmetries across all sorts of aspects of a team, a product stream, a value stream, an organization, programming technique. Fundamentally, if you think in systems terms, you think in terms of pull systems, there's so many symmetries across all of that.
And when you say everything is a pull system, is that like, I'm thinking about, if you treat something as a pull system, it works better than if you don't. Is that part of that, or is that?
That's probably a gross simplification, but it's a really strong starting point. Yes, if you can stop pushing value and instead only produce in response to demand at all levels, at all scales, all levels of abstraction, it's a really strong starting point.
Yeah, that's the feeling I had. Like that's also what I've seen sometimes, is that when you see in companies, when people are struggling, if there is a way to convince people, like, okay, let's try to treat this part as a pull system, and then typically a lot more happens in pull, things become so much easier, and for many people. So it's
Even things like one of my favorite pieces of software is Make, the Unix utility Make. It's a pull system. You say make product name or whatever, and it figures out what the dependencies are and only builds the things necessary, the things that are missing in order to get there. It's an absolutely classic pull system, and given the power of that, I'd almost say you don't need CI pipelines, because they are push systems.
Right. Because then, yeah, okay, I see. Oh, that's at even a deeper level than I was thinking. Wow.
So
Wonderful.
I think symmetry has driven a huge amount of what we've been talking about so far.
Definitely see that. And it's nice because it's again something that is in every part of your life, and that's a nice way of looking at that.
I mean, even as a mathematician, my PhD is in group theory, which is the mathematics of symmetry.
Right. Let's move to that next question, because we've been. I love these. I love these deep conversations and different kind of topics, but at the same time, I hope to get to all of it. So let's move.
Yeah. At the same time, it's going dark.
Oops, sorry. What do you consider at this moment your biggest achievement so far?
I mean, the obvious the obvious thing is kids. Not really my achievement, because it's a team effort. But quite a surprise that someone like me could raise three amazing kids, who are all extremely successful and going about their lives. So that's the first obvious answer. The next one is something that surprises even me, which is having been able to pay the bills and support a family just by asking questions, which is fundamentally all I do.
Yeah, that's a nice way of looking at that. That's yeah, and that's probably is not something you would have foreseen, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 years ago when you're starting out.
The job I've had for the last 20 years didn't exist when I was 20. So yeah, we're in a world that was unimaginable. If you want sort of technical achievements, when I was 24, I designed the encryption algorithms that ended up being used for all large bank transfers in the UK. So UK people who took out a mortgage in the 80s or 90s, that was probably secured by my mathematics. And a few major wins as an agile coach that probably difficult to talk about for commercial reasons. But a few times where, again, just by asking questions, usually along the lines of risk analysis. Sometimes those questions end up saving a project or making a project possible that was ludicrously impossible. I see particularly at XP as an exercise in risk management, and a great way of talking about XP with non-technical people is to talk about it in terms of risk.
Yeah, I really like that because it's very interesting that it was, well, it's called extreme, and that blew off a lot of people thinking about risk, and actually it's the opposite. It's anything but risky because it looks for safety nets and ways that how the whole methodology, everything is supporting each other, and you might learn something and you might think, oh, that doesn't work, but actually it does work because we have lots of things where it's a lot about risk management. That's is something I forgot about it, but that's 10 years ago I was talking a lot about that, because that is so important part, which also explains so much why when people go into the agile world with just Scrum and not combining it with XP, they run into trouble. So, yeah.
I think to me, Scrum and XP almost don't matter. I think it's the deeper symmetries that really matter, and only seeing the ceremonies, only seeing the practices, misses the point.
Right. Fully agree. It's that's just the outcome or the starting point, however you look at it. But it's agile is a lot more than these kind of things. So
I think so. Yeah.
that's really an important part. But nice achievements to talk about. Really, you mentioned 3 different kind of things in different parts of the life. So that's also very nice to look at that. And I think also important for all different kind of reasons. Let's move to that next question. Do you have a personal agility tip to share?
Had I not been retiring this year, I was preparing a conference talk to take on tour, if you like. And the gist of it was this. For anyone in the audience, tomorrow go back to your project and take a ride on any single line of code and follow its journey from the mind of a customer through back into the hands of that customer as realized code. You know, you sometimes see these films, a sped up film of a tour through a factory. Everything's sped up, and you're whizzing along, then you stop and you go up on a forklift and you spin round, and something's done to you, and then you go into here and you wait in a pile for a little while, and then you come out and you go and something more. That sort of journey. So it's the fundamental core of lean thinking is take a ride on a single unit of value and see what its journey is like. How long does it spend in discovery? How long does it spend sitting, waiting to be turned into code? How long does it spend being tested or going through the build pipeline or waiting to be deployed or waiting to be used for the first time? I think I don't think agile methods are necessarily useful compared to thinking about the underlying system. So take that one line of code. How do we choose which line to write? How do we make sure that we've written it correctly and perfectly? How do we make sure we've broken nothing else while we were doing so? How do we get that line of code into the hands of the user? And when it's in the hands of the user, how do we learn from it? And that journey, to me, is what it's all about. I remember, going back nearly 20 years, sitting with a client team, and everyone was in the room, and I said, "What, on average, how long do you think that a line of code takes to go through your system from customer need to customer using it?" And everyone looked around and looked at each other, and they came to a group consensus. About 3 days, we think.
That would be really fast for many companies.
That would be incredible. So we measured it. The average was 29 days, but there were outliers that were well over a year and a half.
Wow.
That exercise is really, really valuable for showing people what the system is. It's not about agility, it's more about lean. But to me, agility is how we deal with the information that gives us.
Right. So yeah, but that's Okay, but then that stays indeed a very agile tip, and looking at that, and yeah, because you first need to have that information before you know how to deal with it, of course.
It doesn't even need to be accurate.
Exactly.
Well,
it does need to be accurate, but it needs to be more accurate than just a few people thinking, oh, it's
yes.
3 days.
Yes.
So you need to have, you need to gather some data about that. And that's indeed...
And sometimes that line of code will make loops through the system if there's bugs in it. It'll get so close to the user, and then it'll come back to be reworked. There's so much information in just taking that ride, being on that journey through the factory.
Yeah, I really like that idea. I've always talked a lot or worked a lot about, okay, what is that part, but never as looking at it from a point of view of the lines of code or I really like that idea. Definitely something that I'm sure will inspire lots of people, but already inspires me. So thank you for sharing that.
I remember Kent Beck posted at some point a thought experiment where he said, everybody stops work and you pick the next line of code that you want to be in production, and a pair work on it until it is in production. And everyone gets to watch. And the watchers are not allowed to contribute to that line of code, but they can contribute to getting it into production quicker.
Ah, wow. Which is very valuable if you can get it from 29 days to 3 days.
Yeah.
From a year and a half to 29 days, of course. That's yeah.
But imagine doing that for every line of code.
Mm-hmm.
And
once it's imaginable.
If most of your effort is spent on actually smoothing that journey, your productivity is likely to get really good. I don't know if anyone's ever done that thought experiment, though.
Well, as a thought experiment, probably yes, but did anyone indeed done it really? Might be, a really wonderful idea to try out and see how can we improve. And for me, a lot of what we try to do with lean working is indeed looking at the value stream and how could we make sure that we go quicker from ID to that something that is useful for the customer.
But it's too easy to sit outside the value stream looking at it.
Exactly. Right. I agree.
Yeah.
It's very tempting for both people outside and inside to think it's the job from the people outside, but it's actually much more powerful if you can do it from the inside. And people from the outside can give permission for people on the inside. But basically, that's what Toyota does to the people who are on the on the production line to change their way of working. That's partly on how can we, because the change is partially on quality, but a lot of that is also about making things move faster. Even if that means sometimes stopping the line to make sure that the next products go faster with quality.
Yeah. And I think agile is fundamentally lean, but adapted to our world.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. Coming from a different point of view, and in that way, a lot of these ideas are not new, but they just all adapted to different kind of worlds, and that's why it's so interesting to learn so much more about lean as an agilist, to then realize, this is not just software, this is going bigger. And that's what you have with beyond budgeting and other kind of things that have similar ideas that might take it to a broader scale. I want to move to that next question about remote work. What have you learned about remote work? And you already shared that in the last couple of years you haven't been to offices from clients, so you mostly work from home, or I don't know, from home, but not from their offices. So do you have ideas, or what have you learned really about remote work?
On the negative side, the rise in remote working, kind of forced upon us by COVID, it's made the fundamental problem of knowledge work far worse, because it's made the work even less visible. An awful lot of the sort of common practices of agile revolve around making the work visible. Scrum boards, Kanban boards, index cards, burn down charts, burn up charts, all the stuff is needed because knowledge work is invisible. You can't see piles of inventory sitting in the factory. You can't see the speed at which that line of code is moving through the value stream. And I think going to remote first it immediately made that worse. I think over time, obviously, most organizations have figured out ways to compensate, but I don't feel yet, I don't see a consensus about how to properly solve that problem. The work is hidden, and even more hidden, I think, with remote working. So that's the negative side. On the positive side, I spent the 4 years immediately after COVID working with one team of half a dozen people, and then moved on to a bunch of other teams. And what I think remote working does is it makes ensemble working work more naturally. Before COVID, I was introducing ensembling with every team I worked with. But in the face-to-face setting, first of all, you've got all the choreography of, do we each have a keyboard, or do we pass a keyboard along the table? How do we find a big screen? The physical constraints were quite demanding. Whereas with remote first, everyone is in their own space. Everyone is there in their own home environment with their own tools, working comfortably in the way they want to work. And so a lot of the difficulties of face-to-face ensembling just disappear when you're remote first. And with a bit of work in terms of social contracts and group agreements, I've actually found remote ensembling less emotionally tiring as well. It takes work to discover that there has to be a 5-minute break every hour, otherwise everybody just blows up. There has to be social agreements like cameras on all the time. If you're not feeling it today, the team can give you something to work on your own. the dynamics of driver, navigator, scribe, etc. There's a lot to work out, but a self-aware team that is consciously evolving, I think remote first makes all of that easier. Certainly for me, I found I was far less. I mean, the main team I'm thinking of here, we were ensembling 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, which is an awful lot. And there were all sorts of checks and balances in place to make that not as demanding as it sounds, not as crazy as it sounds. And from my point of view, it wasn't as socially exhausting as being face to face.
And how does it work to make sure that, because what I've seen when people work remote, that it's sometimes tempting that people do other stuff and get distracted. How do you keep that interesting enough to do 5 days a week or a long period of time, or a lot of time doing that remote work in a very concentrated mode, I would say, because ensembling can be, like you said, demanding and can be demands a lot of attention, I would say.
Exactly, and that's the way to stop people doing side projects. In that, if the driver is changing every few minutes, there isn't time to get distracted.
Right.
But that does mean that at least every hour there needs to be a break. So you're probably working 50 minutes out of every hour. But during that 50 minutes, everyone gets a turn at driving, everyone gets a turn at navigating, or scribing, or whatever the activity is. So it's very engaging, but also extremely rewarding. And you do need sort of social contracts, such as like Rachel Davies introduced the idea of gold card time. So at the beginning of the week, everyone gets a gold card to use doing whatever research they want to do. So at various points in the week, someone will say, "I'm taking this morning out. I'm not ensembling this morning. I'm gonna be doing this instead as a background activity." So there's a good mix of group work and solo work.
Right.
So those constructs are finely balanced and take a while to negotiate with any group of people. But that's a good. It's a good bonding exercise. It's a good way of sort of dialing up team capabilities. It is to consciously think about those things. And another aspect of ensembling for me is retrospectives every day.
Wow.
Don't just leave it for 2 weeks. And in the early days, at least 2 retros every day, so that we're really, really self-aware and really consciously designing the way we want to work.
Yeah, in a way, I would say ensembling is doing a lot of what we do in extreme programming at an even more extreme level. I mean, because ensembling feels sometimes, and I mean, it's completely wrong and feels right at the same time. Like it's a stand-up for a full day because we're all together and we're talking about what we're doing, but we're actually doing the work. We're not just talking about it, but we're doing the work. But that's a lot more communication than, well, if you well, it's not just to remember. I still see people that think that 15 minutes a day talking to each other is too much meetings. But I think like it's the bare minimum if you want to collaborate. But ensembling is making that even more extreme, and in that sense, I realize indeed that every day doing a retro on how could we make what we just done better is very useful, I would say. So yeah, wonderful to share that kind of things. Yeah, I've heard many people who, yeah, I've noticed a lot more. Even today, I talked with a customer. I talked about ensembling and how things could help out. A little bit different because one of the things I said is where you say, okay, take a break every hour. One of the things I've heard a lot of people also saying when they do it's like everybody can at any point go to the toilet or take a little break and then come back. A lot easier than if you're pairing, for example. But indeed, if you're remote working, it might even make much more sense to do that in a joint way. Because it's also looking very closely at the screen the full day. That can be exhausting as well. It's just looking away from the screen is also important from time to time, just for our eyes. I want to move to that next question, and you already talked a little bit about it. What's a book that you have read, or what's something you want to bring up?
So the book I'm mentioning here is a book called It's Not Luck by Ellie Goldratt. This is the sequel.
This is the book, and I'll let you continue because I've added the other book as well that you already talked about earlier on. The choice is the other one. So an awful lot of your subscribers will know about The Goal, a very famous book about flow and bottlenecks in manufacturing. And the theory of constraints. It's Not Luck is the sequel in which the same factory manager is now faced with a set of different problems. But this book, rather than being about flow and bottlenecks, is about the theory of constraints thinking processes. It's really a book about how to do root cause analysis in a very, very organized way. It appeals to me because the thinking processes are all about symmetries, are all about logic and so on. I use them every day with my clients. I said earlier, one of my major achievements is the baffling realization that I've managed to pay all our bills just by asking questions. Those questions, I think, were informed by this book. I think it's nowhere near as well known as The Goal, but in many ways, I think it's a better book. It's a novel. In the loosest sense of the word. As most of Goldratt's books are, I would say.
Yes. It's not a great piece of literature, but it's a well-told story, and it's a great page after page is another example of how to do root cause analysis, and they just come thick and fast, one after the other, solving different problems in his personal life and in his business life. Highly recommended. I mean, it's not an easy read.
Well, that I think that's the strange thing about Goldratt's books is it reads like a story, and because of that, it gives the impression like, oh, it's an easy thing to read, and at the same time, there is so much thought into the stories that I think most of the books from Goldratt, I needed at least 2 or 3 times to fully, well, I'm not even sure I grasped them fully, but to understand a big part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in that sense, all his books are the same and are different in a way that there are a different way of looking at similar kind of things, or how you could apply theory of constraints to different kind of challenges, I would say.
Yes, and the thinking tools that are presented in It's Not Luck, he shows them being used in such a wide variety of circumstances, and I've certainly used them for 25, 30 years in a wide variety of circumstances as well. They work really well for me.
Yeah,
that's not to say that I would necessarily share with people that I've analysed their situation using these tools, but they help me to find the symmetries and find the underlying simplicity in things.
Yeah, and I think, the best thing for people is to read at least one or multiple of his books and to start understanding. And I think it's incredible how valuable all of his books still are, years and years after, decades after they've been written.
Yeah.
And we talked earlier about, lean and agile have similarities. Well, theory of constraints is one of these things that, I don't know, is in both worlds and is existing, and probably has inspired early agilists as well in some of their thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So that's definitely.
I mean, if you were to say to me which for a newcomer, which of Goldratt's books to read, I would start with The Goal, and then read The Choice, and then think about It's Not Luck. But for me, It's Not Luck is the culmination of those. It's the thing that gives me the tools that I use.
I'm trying to think in what order I read them. I don't remember anymore. It's probably this order. Although It's Not Luck is officially the book after The Goal, if I'm
yes,
correct.
That's right.
It's but yeah, it's a good. Yeah, I don't remember anymore. I've read them all three. I think there's another book that I can't come up with. There is another. But yeah, these are the books. Definitely worth recommending, I would say. I want to move to already, for me, a very interesting question, especially in conversations like today that go in all directions, all kind of things, for different kind of things. What is a question that you think I should also ask you, and what's the answer?
So the question I've written down here is, does agile matter in software development?
I'm really looking forward to that answer from you.
And you won't be surprised to hear that I've got two answers. Agile matters historically, I think. I think the creation of the Agile Manifesto was a watershed moment, bringing together a whole bunch of related ideas and presenting them to the world in a way that the world has really taken hold of and run with. So I think that was a very important statement. But it was 24 years ago. And whilst I think those ideas are still very important, because the Agile Manifesto isn't actionable, it's just values and principles. it doesn't help practically day to day. And I've encountered a lot of places.
Sorry, Kevin, when you say it doesn't help, could you say some more? Should I, when I hear you say that, it says something like, if you have problem X, it doesn't tell you what to do. Is that
Right.
what you mean with?
Yes, it's is it too vague? Is it too abstract? I encounter a lot of leaders who say, we want to be agile. And so I ask them, do you want to be agile, or do you want to be more productive and more responsive with happier people? And if the answer is, we want to be agile, I walk away. I think agile is a classification of a bunch of very related ways of working, but no two agile organizations will ever be the same. I hope, because I think teams, organizations, value streams should own their own practices and evolve them. The agile principles are a good guideline saying, if you're doing more of this, then it's probably good. But there's nothing in the Agile Manifesto that says your requirements should be user stories written on index cards. And that's good. It's good that it doesn't say that. But because it doesn't say any of those kind of things, it leaves all the practices open to local development. And to me, that's really, really important, that the team, the value stream, the software team own and build and develop and evolve their own ways of being more and more and more productive. And agility is the North Star, but it's not a thing you can ever do or even be. It's just a color. So, given the choice, I would always say agility is not important. What we're trying to do here is be productive and be responsive and build a happy workplace. And if we do those things well, and if we make logical choices and use the thinking tools from It's Not Luck, and solve problems by turning them into pull systems where that makes sense, and so on, the end result will be something that you could easily describe using the Agile Manifesto.
But you come up with yourself, and it's not.
But the important thing is to be productive and responsive, not to be agile. And I think a lot of the world has lost sight of that distinction.
For me, that I also, what I've noticed is that in the agile, in a big part of the community. I've seen coaches who've never delivered a project, who've never written any code or been testers or being really product owners and or whatever. They've never done that part. And so they're and that makes it a lot harder when you try to do help people becoming agile. Indeed, why are you doing it for?
Yes.
It's really the end goal is still to deliver something to customers, and preferable with happy people, because that's what when you get better software, and that's much more sustainable in the long run. But it is a big important part of it, and indeed many people have forgotten or have never heard about that. I don't know, but I'm really glad that you mentioned that.
And going back to, you asked me for an agility tip in question 6, and I said, take a ride on a line of code. That's not classically, that's not an agility tip. It's see the system for what it is and fix what you see. And the end result of doing that conscientiously and thoughtfully, if the end result is more productive, then you're moving towards agility. But I don't see agility as being the goal. It's more that the Agile Manifesto describes systems that are likely to work well. That makes sense.
It's that first sentence in the Agile Manifesto. We're uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it. I mean, that first sentence, it's so important, and many people even forget about it. But it's about developing software, and by doing it, and that's that is where the basics of the Agile Manifesto is. And of course, if you want to apply it, because some people want to apply agility outside software, then it still is about delivering something to customers, or making things that, and if it's not developing software, it could be anything else if people want that. But this one is particularly written for software development, and that is so crucial. I really like that. I have a slightly different look on the manifesto, in a sense that I agree with you that it's not practical, and at the same time, I'm advising a lot of people when they're stuck to really go to the manifesto and reread it, especially that second page, and look like, okay, the answer is in there. It's not described, like you say, but it helps you thinking like, okay, what problem am I having? Okay, it's on this kind. Okay, and for me, it's been a lot of times inspirational on thinking like, okay, I sometimes see a problem. I can't have a coach that can help me. I'll just reread that page until I find, okay, that inspires me to look at that.
You're absolutely. I agree 100%. And I have a really good workshop that takes half a day, in which we dissect the 12 principles of the Agile Manifesto and really think very deeply about what they mean for the business. Absolutely, it's a great. It is a manifesto. It's a call to arms. But when I hear somebody say, "We want to become agile," or we want an agile transformation, I think that's missing the point. Nobody wants to be agile. What you want is to be productive. What you want is to be more profitable. Exactly. And I think,
and agility can help with that, but it's
but very often we put the cart before the horse.
Oh yeah, I fully agree with that. That's really important to do that, and that in that sense, it is really an important question to ask, and think about. Okay, about agile, where are we, why do we want it, and that's really important. I really like when you ask that question to yeah, I've done it in my world as well. Like, well, the typical kind of question that I sometimes get is, if I want you to help me to do agile by the book, and then I point to all these books behind me and say, which agile, which book, because it's all different. And typically what you want is not one of these books, you want your own book. You want to figure out what works at this moment for your company. And in 3 years and 10 years, it will be a completely different answer.
Even looking at the XP White Book, going back nearly 30 years now, there are 3 separate places in that book where Kent Beck says, pick your biggest problem, start from there, make that better. And it's not about the practices he uses in his team. It's about the practices you find for making your problems go away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's and when you say the white book, that means the first edition of the extreme programming book. That's the one you mean.
In that first edition, there are 3 separate places where that statement is made. Yeah. It's not so clear in the second book, in the second edition.
Well, yeah, I love both versions for different kind of reasons. For me, it should have been a sequel or whatever.
Yes.
The first edition should not have disappeared, which unfortunately it has.
They're separate books.
They're separate books, and they're both very valuable books. But yeah, unfortunately, the first edition. Well, you can probably still find it somewhere on the internet, but it's a lot harder to find it because if you buy the new book, it's always the second edition. I've said it multiple times here on the podcast. I wish it would have been two different. Two different.
I agree.
So that's would have been valuable. I want to move to already that last question. Who do you think I should ask next?
Clark Ching.
And
Clark.
That's him.
That's him.
The bottleneck guy.
The bottleneck guy. He's been using the theory of constraints as an agile coach for 20 years. He did about 20 years ago. He did an MBA, and his thesis was how to apply the theory of constraints in software development. He knows theory of constraints inside out. He's written really readable books. He's a funny guy. He's very good at what he does, and he's thinks deeply. He's very entertaining.
Yeah, he was on my list for a long. Well, I don't know exactly when, but rather from the start when I started this, just like a lot of other people. But yeah, for me the idea is always that other people invite each other. I sometimes make exceptions, but yeah, I was really hoping for an invitation for Clark. So I'm really happy with that because yeah, I do remember meeting him at a conference. I totally don't know anymore where. Because if I'm correct, he's from New Zealand, so I'm not sure how many times he's been to Europe.
He lived in Edinburgh for quite a while. He used to run the Lean Agile Scotland monthly meetups. So going back a while.
Closer. Again, like I don't know when I've met him, some time ago, but really looking forward to having that conversation. Kevin, it's been a wonderful time. We've been, I don't know, probably talking close to 2 hours, maybe a little bit more, but time flew by. Yes, I can see around me that it's already dark. Well, while we started, there was still light outside. But yeah, for me, time flew by. Really wonderful conversation to have.
I've had a great time as well. Sorry, I do. Once you open me up, I do talk forever. Sorry.
There is no sorry there. I love these kind of things, and I've seen well, I've asked a lot of side questions because there were so interesting stories, which was what I was expecting. The last couple of questions, I went a little bit faster to try to keep it a little bit. I had actually two or three conversations close to 3 hours, but that was at the very early of the podcast when I didn't pay much attention. Now I pay a little bit more attention, but still wonderful stories. And I also don't want to, the goal is here for me to have conversations, to learn about people, and not as to keep short interviews. The idea is really it should be a conversation, and it should be a wonderful ways of interacting, which for me
it's been great from my point of view. Thank you for doing that.
Well, the pleasure was all mine. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching Who's Agile, where the stories of agilists come to life. I hope you liked today's interview. Subscribe if you're not subscribed and want to get to know other agilists.